Welcome back. We will start with session 7, which would be a fireside chat. The topic for discussion is the Gold Principles Group. This is an initiative jointly supported by the London Bullion Market Association and the World Gold Council, and is mandated to promote high standards of integrity, transparency, and sustainability across the gold supply chain. Its key objective is to align the industry around a set of shared principles. I request Mr. John Mulligan, Head of Sustainability Strategy at World Gold Council, to chair the session. Joining him in conversation is Mr. Albert Cheng, CEO of SBMA, we all know that one, but he's also the chair of the Gold Principles Group. With a round of applause, requesting both Mr. John Mulligan and Mr. Albert Cheng to take over.
So everyone, welcome to this fireside chat. And I have the pleasure to introduce John Mulligan, and who is a person from World Gold Council. And together with LBMA, we put together this Gold Principle Group. And there are history, and there are reason, and there's why, and why we want to do it. I think there are a little bit of background, which before I become chair of the Gold Principle Group, they have worked behind the scene for quite some time. And maybe John can enlighten us why we need to set up this, and what that transpired to the community in ASEAN.
Sure. Thank you, Albert. And thank you, Albert, again for the conference. Thank you to the organizers, to Eventel. Yeah, it's great to be back here, see so many old friendly faces, colleagues old and new. And I should just say that I think I mentioned last year, I've known Albert for quite some time. I think it's my 21st year, Albert, since we met.
That long?
21 years. Before we start the conversation, I would like to also congratulate Margaret, who looks exactly the same as when we first met. So whatever her secret is, I'd like to share it. Yeah, the Gold Principles Group. Now, to many of you, I suspect this is something completely new. But as Albert's already said, it took a few years to get here where we are now. And it was, the gestation was a few years ago. The LBMA and the World Gold Council were hosting a responsible sourcing and sustainability summit. And when we started deciding on the agenda, we realized that we didn't necessarily agree or have the same focus on what sustainability meant. So at the end of the conference, we convened a working group, of which Albert was part, a working group, I think it was 85 different organizations across the gold supply chain. And we said, let's try and agree what we mean by responsibility and sustainability. And I think it's really important because you hear organizations say we have a sustainability agenda or we're making impact, but they don't necessarily talk or mean the same thing. So first of all, let's agree the foundation. And that's what started the Gold Principles Group. It's the principles part is because after a year or so, we agreed something, it's a long title, we agreed something called the Gold Industry Declaration of Responsibility and Sustainability Principles.
That's long.
It's long. Gold Principles is what we stick with now. And we decided to draw together a number of organizations, collective organizations, associations, exchanges that represented, we hoped, the whole industry. So these are the 14 signatories of the Gold Principles Group. Ourselves, the LBMA, Responsible Jewelry Council, the SBMA, the LME, a broad range of organizations that tries to cover the whole gold sector globally. And I think that's who we are, and Albert was there from the start. We could talk more about the components, the individual organizations. There are some organizations that aren't on that list. I'm going to point and look at Jonathan Jodry and say the IPMI aren't on that list. The door is open, but nonetheless, we think we're a fairly broad representative group. And I'll probably mention this again. I've been in the industry 20 odd years. some people have been in the industry longer. During that time, it was extremely unusual for all of those organizations to talk, for all of them to get together and to seek to agree something, to share something. And so I think even before we talk about principles and actions, just getting together, convening, sharing information, actually I think is a significant milestone. As it happens, we're having a group meeting after this. But what do you think?
Yeah, these 14 organizations, just look at the names, they represent a cross-section of our industry. And each association, some are more mature, some are catching up, is on the sustainability and responsible sourcing. They have done something inside their sector. But collectively as an industry, gold industry, we do not have one single voice to tell people what we subscribe to, what we are adhering to. Each one will talk about their own sector. Maybe, let's say, jewelry sector will be very big, the mining sector will be very big, but it doesn't cover the whole industry. So, in a nutshell, this group come together is to look at all the things that done related to this core value, and then see whether there are any summation of it, and maybe summarize it in some simple statement, and let people remember this statement as a collective voice of the industry. And hence, we have this so-called 10 principles summarized. And we can go through that 10 principles later. But it is more an answer to this evolving scene. The whole gold industry change every moment because of the external forces, demand, supply, the who buy it and who will keep it. Those are the things that are continually evolving. So we need to actually find a way to engage our customer, engage with our target audience to make sure that what we do is following the best practice for the whole industry and to maintain the kind of transparency and sustainability that we all actually subscribe to. Right?
Yep. Thank you, Albert. Yeah, and I think it's important because we'll come to the principles in a second, but it's important because for, I think, a large part of the industry, we've made great progress on responsible sourcing. The responsible gold guidance, responsible gold mining principles, codes of conduct, codes of practice. Good practice exists, but they've been built in isolation, and they don't always talk to each other. So first of all, creating a forum where we can actually connect the dots, I think, is quite significant. And I think, again, the earlier presentations said, this is a relatively small industry. It's a small industry with big impacts potentially, and representing large value. So how is that communicated to the wider world? How do you communicate that value, that purpose, and how do you build trust? And the trouble with the industry for a long time, I would suggest, is it was fragmented, operating in silos. So how do you encourage best practice, and how do you actually start to share and encourage best practice in others? And I think that's what we've started to try and achieve. How, from your perspective, you mentioned the difference between capacities and approaches. How do you think the kind of ASEAN perspective and the SBMA's kind of perspective is on this?
Well, even look at our SBMA membership. We have 79 members. They are also coming from a cost spectrum of members, and then they are banks, they are exchanges, and they are refinery, and wholesaler, retailer. So even within our ecosystem, there is a cross section of everything in the gold sector. So I think what really the objective of this grouping is to try to establish and promote a reference point that everybody understand and easy to communicate. I think one of the issues that we have is sometimes what you do actually is as simple as we are trying to give you a product which doesn't harm the earth and it is done through a sustainable process, and put it in front of you is a product that we all feel comfortable. It's just as simple as that, but because of the many parameters that we have to account in and the language and the lingo that how you present it, sometimes when you communicate it to the end customer, it becomes too complicated for them. So I think basically is we like to have a unified message among the group. And in order to achieve that, we need a continuous platform for the industry group to continue to dialogue. If there is any changes here and there, we are able to actually make adjustment, amendment in time. And I mean, all these things have to be done in a responsible and transparent way. How can we achieve that? Is to try to continually reporting or putting up to the public eye that what we have been doing, either, I mean, currently maybe each of the organizations using their way of communication, but again, I said earlier, they are all sector basis. So we like to use this goal principle group as a unified voice to convey this message to the eventual end receiver of this message. So this is basically the objective that we are trying to achieve.
Thanks. And I think it's worthwhile mentioning or detailing what the principles are. So,
yes.
So we can have a unified voice, but we realize that demonstrating progress, demonstrating awareness of specific issues required us to crystallize. So I've just shown there that this is what the statement was that we started with. You can see the signatures. You probably can't see the signatories, but there were 10 principles which we tried after a year with the working group to say this defines the ESG sustainability priorities for the gold sector, and by implication, frankly, you could say for the precious metal sector. That's the principles in detail, the 10, and I'm fully aware you probably can't read them, so that's them simplified. 10 principles that basically we think cover the whole ESG sustainability spectrum. I'll just talk about, we start with responsible sourcing. Now, for a very long time in the gold supply chain, that was what we meant by sustainability, responsible sourcing. We didn't really have that much to say about the other 10 principles. You've heard Principle 8, for instance. The conference started with a lot of conversations around Principle 8, the formalization of ASM. But it's not embedded, it's not codified anywhere what we mean. We don't always talk about the same things. So this, we think, this set of principles, you could always add to the shopping list, but this, we think, covers most of the ground in terms of these big picture impacts. And I mentioned responsible sourcing because if you look to responsible gold guidance, if you look to the Responsible Jewelry Council's code of practice, it doesn't include many of these at all. Sorry, I seem to have gone backwards. There you go. It doesn't include many of these at all. So the question is, how do we get together and start considering these beyond responsible sourcing? When it comes to broader, wider society and how they talk about sustainability, these other things are what they're talking about. So again, clarity, consistency, coherence. And now, I think it's fair to say, Albert, we're at a point where we're trying to say, what does progress mean? How do we then demonstrate progress on each of these?
Yes, I think these 10 principles, if you summarize it, it is in 2 or 3 main areas. And I think the most important part of it is responsible sourcing in relation to our industry. And on this specific subject matter, a lot of our members has already a lot of mature actually practice which pointing toward this principle. However, I mean, it might not be able to broadcast to the whole industry. So by grouping together and demonstrating that each organization has done a specific task at a very good result, if we collect them together and report on a regular basis, just like I make an analogy that one piece of chopstick, if we can break it easily, but if 10, 15 pieces of chopstick, you cannot break it. So if all our members who actually are doing along the same way as like the responsible sourcing, we group it together and then we bring it together in one place, we could demonstrate the power and the effort of it.
And I think, so often when we introduce sustainability issues, when I speak on stage, I always wait to see how many people leave the room to see how comfortable they are with the issue of sustainability and how relevant it is. And so when me and Albert were talking, there's always the question of how relevant it is with particular areas, particular regions. We've seen a lot of political upheaval, some pushback in certain places. But I just thought, even here where we are in Singapore, just to remind the audience that this is a key driver of consumer perceptions, reputation. So the big market research company Nielsen did a survey of ASEAN consumers in 2023, and it's interesting that 86% in Indonesia, 74% in Thailand, and 72% in Singapore already thought that sustainability was more important in their buying decisions than 2 years previous. So this is quite a significant driver. If we look at the regulatory space, and again, sometimes the gold industry can sort of lag the regulatory space, that you see that the SGX now has climate-related reporting based on what we call TCFD, which is in one of the principles. The Singapore Green Plan of 2030 and Singapore's regulations now make mandatory climate reporting is now mandatory for organizations of a certain scale. Malaysia is likely to follow, and Indonesia this year. These are pressures that you need to be aware of if you're a corporate actor of scale. They're also drivers of your consumers. And on the flip side, the risks that they represent, if you aren't aware of them now and we're not responsive and showing awareness of them now, they will bite you later. And so if we look at the geopolitical shifts in the world, for instance, migration has changed an awful lot of geopolitical perceptions, voting patterns. Climate-related migration is now greater than conflict-related migration, or it was until very recently at least. So these are very big risks that will change the nature of your markets. And so I think it's worth, again, just saying we need to be aware of them and we need to demonstrate to the world that the market together is aware of them. But it is, as I say, Albert, relevant, I think, to this local market as well as others.
Relevant is important. I think, taking SBMA as an example in joining this initiative, we have very mature members who are already fully subscribed to the principle that we laid out. But for some of the members who are just in the early stage of adaptation, we have to continue to impeach upon them that to follow this is something that maybe John, you can pick it up.
Yeah. So the idea of several of these and how we demonstrate progress is, first of all, there has been progress made already. We just haven't shared it. We haven't communicated it and haven't shared it. So I'm going to focus on one of my specializations, which is climate change. So we at the World Gold Council spent a long time, certainly 5 or 6 years, dedicating a lot of research effort on carbon footprinting of gold, defining its decarbonization pathway, ensuring we're in a good place in terms of data and so on. But then we realized when we talked to the jewelry trade or the refiners that they aren't aware of that data. how do we then share that? How do we basically say, okay, if you wish to disclose and report, what tools do you have? And so we're hoping, and in fact we're already getting there, I think, that what we can do is those that have shown leadership or have the resource, the capacity, they can turn to their the other members and say, okay, we're aware you're not in a maturer place, you may not have the resources, we can share the resources. And I think that's a big difference now, a big change. So when it comes to SMEs, for instance, small enterprises, how do they respond to climate? Well, actually, there are at least 3 guidance documents now within the membership that we can share. We can say, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you don't have to do the research, you don't need the capacity or the funds, you can share the resources that are already there. And I think that's, again, a big change. It means that instead of pushing out training material, webinars, and hoping somebody listens and hoping somebody reads, we can start sharing among this group. And just to go back to that group, if you look at the various associations, collectively, they represent hundreds of thousands of companies. So that sharing can be quite significant. And if we can raise the level of knowledge, if we can raise the level of awareness, but also start to demonstrate that the progress is being made across the group, I think then we can, have confidence that the gold market is in a good space responding to these issues. So
talking about sharing, I think I circle back to my earlier discussion is why the SBMA joined this principal group is to bring our member up to the speed, to the topic that is most appropriate for them to continue to carry a business. Sometimes you might not know that the impact will come to you if you are not aware of what's going on in the wider part of the industry. So in terms of this sharing, is it more important for the smaller members, smaller organization, which might not have the resources to do all the things. So with this sharing and with this camaraderie that they built up, I think we will help them to bring them up to speed.
Yep, thanks. And I think Mike mentioned earlier, from the Silver Institute point of view, the need for collaboration. Wouldn't it be good to have a collaborative platform? I'd like to think that the Gold Principles Group actually now represents that for gold. Actually, Mike, a lot of the resources are equally applicable to others in the precious metals industry and beyond. So it's hopefully a useful resource beyond just the membership. Hopefully we can, we can make this available to a broad set. I mentioned one thing, I mentioned climate. When we got together a couple of years ago with the LBMA, it was the LBMA chair at the time, Paul Fisher, who said, the gold industry needs to get together. The gold industry needs to get together. And he was talking about one issue, which was a climate roadmap. But we're now in a position of developing that roadmap. So we're kind of honoring his mandate or his suggestion that we actually make progress. And that will be one of the first deliverables. I just realized as well that when I say demonstrating progress, we are in fact, we've just launched this morning, surprise, conveniently, surprise, surprise, we've launched the website. So the website is now online. You can find it via that QR code, and it allows you to explore the principles and explore the individual organizations. But really importantly, it also allows you to check progress. And we're encouraging our stakeholders, our members, to use this to scrutinize the progress of the industry. And we're fully aware that some of our members haven't even started. Some of the group are just literally getting to grips with some of these issues. But as I say, the idea is together we can create and support each other. It's a mutually supportive platform. I was going to ask you, Albert, what do you think the challenges might be? We've told the world they can scrutinize this. We've told the world we can demonstrate progress.
Yeah.
What might slow us down?
I think the challenges that we always face with new initiative is an inertia to change. I mean, why I have been doing this for ages and all the time, why ask me to change it? I think this is one thing that we often face with. And the other challenges of the principal group in general is the diversity of our membership, which sometimes limit the imagination, because some members will do not actually think that this is necessary because it doesn't affect their current business horizon. But very often, this kind of effect to the business is a more long-term coming. So the diversity side of our industry is another obstacle. There may be other external factors which come from government force. I mean, some regulatory changes or some sudden market changes that require the industry to do major adjustment. Sometimes they might compromise this kind of principle in the name of survival. So these are challenges that we often face with.
Yeah, no, I think we're fully aware that in certain contexts, and we're seeing it currently, there's a headwind. There's a deliberate efforts to protect business as usual when business as usual may not actually be fit for purpose when we're talking about the future. So I think there's political cycles, regulatory cycles. I think the positive is that as a group, as a global group representing every part of the whole, every segment of the gold industry, we can look beyond small individual headwinds and try to make progress. I agree entirely what you say in terms of diversity. Some of the organizations, as I say, haven't got started, don't have the resource, but the aim is as a collective we can start to as I say, share and build, and that gives me some optimism to look beyond the immediate headwinds.
Yeah, the initiative that we are now pushing forward is to have one unified voice for the whole industry. I mean, currently it's this 10 principle, but this 10 principle can be revised, can be evolved, and it could be adapted to a new version, or even we can add new things. So having a unified industry voice worldwide is a platform for industry to get together to tackle any imminent issue which come up at all times, and it is a platform that I think we like to achieve eventually.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but it's all about building trust. And you know, many of us within the industry trust each other, but beyond the industry, that trust is sometimes lacking. So as Albert says, how do we build trust? How do we show a unified, coherent response to key pressures and key risks? And that's what the Gold Principles Group is about, and we're going to meet in 2 hours. So,
yeah, our next chapter, we meet quarterly, and using the convenience of conferences, we often have quarterly meeting on the side of the conference, and today afternoon we have a quarterly meeting with among the 14 signatory groups.
And I'd like to thank Albert for chairing that group. So thank you for your time. Thank you, Albert.
John. Thank you, John, for coming along.
Thank you, sir. Would you want any reflections from this floor? It's okay. If you have any questions or any comments, yes, please.
Okay, so the principles have been around for quite a while, but now the question is, how do you go from principles to real decisions and applications? And with now 14 signatory, how are you going to handle the differences in view? Because out of those organizations, there are very big differences in views of ASM, yes, or transparency or reporting. So how are you going to close that gap to allow this to transform to effective actions?
It's a really good question, and we have employed a third-party secretariat, an independent secretariat, to try and connect the various groups and understand where the gaps are, where the dissonances, the tensions are. we are fully aware that when we ask the signatories to sign, not all of them agree on every principle. This was the overarching set of principles that basically we came up with. That said, they were willing to sign aware of the principles. So then the question is, and a good example is something like artisanal. We have an artisanal Gold Council representing artisanal miners, but also there are some countries that have a completely different position, and we also have observers, which I didn't mention, several observers from other countries who are very supportive, but say we cannot act or cannot be seen to act on that particular principle, as Albert says, probably because of the regulatory space. So the question is, how do we respond to them? So we meet as a group, but then we have bilateral conversations about how to progress individual members on specific principles that they can make progress on. It's all about kind of materiality and context. So understanding what is material to the association or the group and its members, that's what we focus on and prioritize. As a group, we may make collective progress. We don't expect everybody to make progress on all principles, but we are employing somebody now to build the data. We're starting to have an annual reporting cycle. So next year, we'll be able to sort of report on where we are and where the membership is.
It's an evolving process, and we'll continue to evolve.
That was the short answer.
Thank you.